The Nintendo Wii was one of the most innovative consoles ever released, with fantastic games and a unique motion sensing handset. Today, at under £50 for a fully working system, it represents great value for money as not only an original gaming system, but with some simple hacking to soft mod it, you can turn it into a full retro gaming centre for all the family. So, let me show you how to hack your Wii. Hi and welcome to Bytes and Bits. In today's video we're going to have a look at one of my favourite consoles, which is the Nintendo Wii. Now when this was launched in 2006, it was actually one of the most innovative machines on the market. So not only do we have a really neat console itself with some fantastic games, but it actually had a fairly unique game controller in the Wiimote. So not only is this the standard sort of controller with buttons and joysticks on it, but it also is a motion sensing device. So as we move this around and shake it and so on, that can actually control our in-game characters. And that led to some very innovative and very playable games using this motion sensing technology. Now, if you have a look on eBay at the moment, you can actually pick up a full Wii console with the power supply, motion sensors, handsets and so on for under £50. And at that price range, it actually represents a fantastic value for money gaming centre. So not only will we have access to our Wii games, actually buying those original copies and so on, and of course GameCube games, because the Wii was fully compatible with GameCube games, but by doing a little bit of soft modding, we can actually hack the Wii so that we can then start to run our own, what are known as homebrew applications. And these allow us to then install emulators, so we can emulate up to and including the Nintendo 64 and also the PS1. But we can also then allow USB loading of Wii and GameCube games. So if we can find some backup copies of those games, and again we can easily find those anywhere on the internet, we can load those onto a USB drive or a hard drive and attach that to our Wii, and then we have access to the full Wii catalogue and the full GameCube catalogue, loading those from our backup files and playing them then on the native hardware, obviously then at full speed. So if you compare that to something like a Raspberry Pi gaming system or an Android TV box, that actually gives us a really powerful device with great emulation and of course then our full Wii and GameCube compatibility. So in this video I'm going to take you as far as getting hold of a Wii, what bits we need. We're then going to have a look at how we can soft mod that using one of the hacking exploits, and then see how we can actually use what's known as a USB loader to allow us to use these backup game files, put them onto a drive, and then run them natively on our Wii system. So let's get started with that. For your Wii setup then, you need to make sure that you have all the correct parts. So of course you'll need the console itself, so the Wii console, that comes in a range of colours. You'll then need a Wii power supply, so this is a 12-volt power supply, but it does have a specialist connector on that to plug it into the Wii. You'll then need a sensor bar, so the official sensor bar that comes with the Wii plugs into the back of the unit, but that does use a bespoke connector for that. You can get USB powered sensor bars, or of course replacement, the original ones. And there are a couple of USB ports around the back of the Wii which you can use to power that. Now you'll then need a Wiimote. Now the Wiimote comes in two parts. There's the handset itself, and there are two versions of these. You can get the standard handsets and then the Wii Motion Plus handsets. So I would advise going for a Wii Motion Plus if you can. And then also you'll need a nunchuck, which is the second hand controller, which plugs into the base of the main Wiimote controller. And you'll need that for some of the games. Now finally, the Wii uses a composite or component output to play into some sort of television, and that isn't really compatible with modern sets. So I would advise getting hold of a Wii to HDMI converter. So that plugs in the back of the Wii, and then you have a full HDMI output. We're also going to need a correctly formatted SD card to store our Homebrew data. Now, the Wii uses the standard SD format, so the bigger one in the picture here, but you can of course use micro SD cards by putting them into one of these adapters. Now, SD cards, the Wii is compatible with standard SD cards and SDHC cards. So if you look on these, you'll see that there is a little mark on them there. Now, the SDHC cards tend to go up to a maximum of about 32 gigabytes, and that is sort of what the standard Wii is compatible with. But we can actually use the SDXC cards, which allow you to go up to much higher capacity cards. But we do need to format them a bit differently. So if you're using a standard SD card or an SDHC card, you can basically format that in your computer just as an FAT32 drive, and that should work straight off. For our SDXC cards, we do need a little bit of extra help. To do this, you're going to need the help of a partition tool. So the one I use is this mini tool partition wizard, which you can get for free from this website here. So just go into the home user area and go to the partition wizard free, and then download and install that. And what that lets us do is to actually have a look at our hard drives and SD drives on our computer, and just really work with the partitions and low-level formatting of those. So I have an SD card, so an SDXC SD card put into my computer here. We have here a 64 gigabyte card. Now at the moment I've obviously been using that elsewhere. So what I first need to do is to actually clean all the partitions off that disk to get it totally clean. So in this tool, I simply right click on here and I can delete all partitions and say yes to that. A lot of these tools queue the jobs up in a little list here, and they don't actually apply them until you click the apply button. So let's apply that and actually clean that partition off that SD card. So we now have a completely clean SD card. So we need to format that now for use in our Wii console. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to click on there, right click on there. I'm going to create a partition. I'm going to call this just my Wii partition. Again, the name is entirely up to yourself. So it's a primary partition. We need it to be an FAT32 partition. And the important thing here is we need to set the cluster size to 16 kilobytes. That seems to be the version that I found works best and seems to give us best compatibility. So once we've got that, so we've got our, let me just read through that. So our Wii partition label there. So with FAT32, 16 kilobyte cluster size, okay that. We can see it's sitting here in the operations pending. If I apply that, that will now create that partition and format it for me in the correct format for use in the Wii. So once that's finished, I now have my 64 gigabyte SD card that should now work in my Wii console. So before we start modding the Wii, we need to make sure that we've got everything set up ready to go. Now, if you've just bought a Wii console for setting all this up, then obviously we're going to need to clean out the old owner's information. At least just make sure that we've got all of that out of the way. So to do that, we need to go into our Wii options. So I'm using my Wii Mote, or the remote here, to move the cursor around, and then using the A key to select options. So if I come into here, we can then go into our Wii settings, and that will then load up into our settings menu. So again, if I select the arrow across, and again, you'll see here we have a number of options for setting things up. So you can set up your language and your country if that's not already correct. We can also then format the Wii system memory, so that will clean out all of the old settings, including people's Mii characters and so on. We'll eventually probably want to do a Wii system update, but again, we can't do that unless we've got Wi-Fi connected. So that's probably the next thing we need to do. So back into our settings then. So if we go to our Wii settings, so if we come across, we can find our internet settings, select that. We can now come into our connection settings, And you probably don't have any connections set up at the moment. So I'm going to set up connection number 1. I'm going to connect to my Wi-Fi with a wireless connection. I'm going to get my Wii to search for my access point. So that should now come up with various networks that it can see. So again, GT Wireless is mine here. So I'm going to pick the strongest strength. I have a number of access points in my house. I'm just going to pick the strongest one for where I'm currently sitting. I then need to input my password. So let me just go off and do that. So once that's done, I can then click on the OK button. And I want to save these settings. So it will now do a connection test just to make sure that it can actually connect up to Wi-Fi and access the internet. So once that has verified it can connect to the internet, it will probably offer to do a Wii system update. So again, if you just bought this console, then obviously you can click on the yes button. If you have already been playing about with the modding software and so on, then anything that you do as regards a system update will tend to wipe out anything you've already done. So do bear that in mind. So I have been doing some things with my Wii, so I'm just going to say no for the moment. But again, as I say, if this is a brand new one to you, do a system update just to make sure that you've got everything up to, well, it won't be up to date now, but it'll be up to date with the latest version that was released from Nintendo. So that gets us now, we've got the system cleared out, we've got our Wi-Fi connection all up and running, so we're now ready to actually start going in and installing this hack. So there are a number of different methods we can use to exploit our Wii, and the one I'll be using today is the str2hacks method. To install the str2hacks exploit, we need to trick our Wii console into downloading some software from a non-Nintendo server. So we're going to go into our Wii options again and off to our Wii settings, and we're going to do this in our internet connection again. So we need to go to our internet settings, and then we're going to change our connection settings. So we select the connection that we've set up for our internet system. We're then going to change the settings on that. And the way we're going to do this is if we go across here, we'll eventually come to our DNS settings. So DNS servers, in effect, are the sort of telephone directory for the internet. So when a computer such as our Nintendo Wii here tries to find a web address, it will ask a DNS server where that server exists. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell our Wii to use a specially set up DNS server. So when it tries to find the Nintendo servers, it will actually be redirected to one which contains this exploit. So in where it says obtain DNS, we don't want to obtain auto, so we want to say no for that. And we then want to go to our advanced settings. We need to set our primary DNS server then to this web address, so this IP address, so it's 18.188.135.135.9. Now, again, I'll put this IP address in the description down below, and you'll also find it on the project page which goes along with this, and again, links to that will be in the description as well. Now, depending on when you do this exploit, this DNS server address may change. So if you use this one and it finds that it cannot connect to the internet, then you'll need to find out what the latest one is. So just do an internet search for the latest str2hacks DNS servers, and you should find that. So when I click on OK here and confirm that, it will now try and just confirm that those settings actually work. So just make sure I save those, and it will do another connection test. And we should at this point find that we get a successful internet connection, and that will now be it talking to the new str2hacks DNS server. So if everything's gone okay, you should have it popping up saying that it was successful and that it's now offering you a system update. So at this point, we don't want to do a system update because we're not actually talking to the real servers. But that means that we are now ready to actually trigger this exploit. So we need to go back to our internet settings. Okay, so we're now in our internet settings. And the way we trigger it is by actually downloading the new agreements and contact information. So if we click on that, and then when it asks us if we want to use the Wii Shop channel, we say yes. and this should now trigger the exploit download. So again, we must review the services agreements. So if we click on next for that, it's now going to download the exploit. And if you get to this screen where you have, it's actually supposed to be a rainbow donkey. I'm not quite sure if it does look like that. But if you get to this, we are actually in the right place. If you don't get this screen coming up, then it hasn't worked and you have to go back and just check your settings. So we don't actually need to press any of these buttons. We just sit back and wait for the hack to operate. So if everything's gone correctly, you should get some information screens coming up as it's actually installing the exploit. And just let that run through. And eventually you'll end up on this screen, which is really saying that everything has been installed correctly. So we just need to wait a couple of seconds until we get the continue option appearing. So once you get that, just simply press the number 1 button, and we should now be into our HackMe installer. So we can see here that it is offering to install the Homebrew channel. So if again, the navigation for the menus here is use the D-pad or the little arrow keys to navigate around, and then the A button to select. So we're on continue here. So if I press that, that should then install the Homebrew channel for me. So if I do that, I can then come up here and I can install the Homebrew channel. And then yes for that. So that's going to install Homebrew for me. And click on continue for that. So once that's installed, we need to install a package called BootMii. So BootMii is in effect a sort of a boot manager for our Wii, but it has the added advantage of allowing us to back up our NAND flash memory so that if we do something bad in Homebrew and actually brick our Wii, then this will help us get that back and restore our system. So BootMii does require our SD card now to be inserted into the Wii, so make sure that's in place, and then we can select the BootMii option from our menu. Once we've got the SD card inserted, we need to prepare that, and we'll just say for yes for that. And that will now make sure that that SD card is all set up and ready to run. So if we click on continue now, we should be able to install BootMii. Now you may have a couple of options here. If you get the option to install BootMii as a Boot 2 installation, then run that first. If you don't get that option, or if you have now installed the Boot 2 option, then we have to install it as an iOS option. So if we select that, again, it's saying here that you need to make sure that your SD card is all ready and prepared. So we just say yes for that, and it should now go through and install our BootMii. And that's all finished now. So we now have our BootMii installed, we have our Homebrew installed. So if we come back to our main menu and exit, we should drop into Homebrew. So really the first thing we should do is to back up our Wii. So if we launch BootMii, that will take us into our BootMii menu. Now once we're in BootMii, our remote isn't going to work anymore. So we need to use our power button to change our selection, and then the reset button to make our selection. So if you use the power button to get across to the cog icon and then press that, and then select the first icon on this list, which is showing the NAND being backed up onto the SD card, and that will set the backup process in action. So you'll see that we are going through the NAND here, copying the various blocks across. Now you will get these coloured blocks coming up. So green means that it's been processed okay. You will get a few black ones as you go through here, but that's perfectly natural. But let the system run through here. After that, it will go through a verification process, at which point it will go through and check everything has been backed up correctly. And once that's finished, we will then have our Wii fully backed up onto our SD card. Once that's all finished, we can then go across and select our back icon, and then select our Homebrew channel, and that should drop us back into the Homebrew homepage. At this point then, your Wii is actually fully modded and we are ready to get some extra software in. But before we do that, there are a couple of sort of housekeeping things which you should really do just to make sure that everything is going to run smoothly and that if anything does go wrong, we can get back from it. So we're going to be using a few of the tutorials in this website here, so Wii.guide. And if you go across to there and go to your site navigation, you'll find that there are a large number of sort of helpful files in here taking you through various tasks and so on. So what we're going to do is we are going to install something called Preloader and then cIOS. So if we have a look at Preloader first. So Homebrew apps are obviously not official Nintendo Wii software. And if you're running any sort of unofficial software, there is a chance that you can, in effect, brick your console. So that's really where you sort of do something that stops the normal Wii operating system from booting up and really just leaves your console just there as a useless brick. Now, the apps that we're going to be playing about with to do sort of loading in backup games and to do emulation and so on, there is very, very little chance that you will do that. But some of the Homebrew apps do much lower level software mods onto your Wii, and they do present a brick risk. So it's worth having some sort of protection in place, and this is where Preloader comes in. So Preloader is a bit of software that inserts itself into the boot sequence of your Wii, so that if the normal Wii operating system is having a problem starting, then this gives you an opportunity to preempt that, get inside and fix things, and then return it back into its normal Wii operating system. And again, this is why we used BootMii a bit earlier on to take a Nand backup. So Preloader will actually let you get into the system, go into BootMii, restore your Wii settings, and then fix hopefully anything that's happened that's making it brick. So to download Preloader, we simply need to scroll down this page a wee bit until we get to the links. And as you can see here, we simply need to put some stuff onto our SD card. So the Preloader installer is accessed through this link. And on here, you'll find a download. And all I'm going to do at the moment is I'm going to download them to a folder on my hard drive. So we've got that one down. So back into the Preloader, there is a second file here called Load Preloader, which will allow you to trigger Preloader anytime you want. So it's worth having that if you do need to get in and make some tweaks. So let's download that one as well. And similar idea, we're just downloading it to a folder on my hard drive. So that's Preloader all ready to go. And we'll go through installing. We'll install all of the apps in one go at the end. So next one we want to look at then, again, through our site navigation, you'll find it in here. And we want to go to the cIOS app, which I have sitting over here. So what this lets us do is allows us to install these custom iOSs, which will actually help some of the software that we need to use later on. It just provides a load of extra code available sort of as part of the operating system. So all we need to do is to go across and get hold of that. So again, we need just to download these installation files. So let's go across there. And we're just going to download that as it is. Okay, now this cIOS application does require a little bit of setting up, which is all detailed in this page on the Wii guide, and I'm going to take you through that in a second. But I say, if you do need to go through that, I will have it both on my website, and obviously you can follow it through on here. But we'll go through that in just a second. So we've now got our Preloader and our cIOS, and that basically is the base that you need before you start setting up and installing the actual Homebrew apps that we want to use. So let's now go in and install those onto our Wii. So to put these apps onto our SD card, we simply need to have the downloaded zip installers that we've just downloaded. And then obviously we need to have our SD card back in our PC. So on the SD card, you'll see that the BootMii installation has put a few files on there and a folder obviously for the BootMii information. We now need to install the Homebrew apps. And the way the Homebrew apps work is they need to live inside a folder on this SD card. It's simply called apps. And we then need to copy the installation files into this folder. So let's go back to our Homebrew. And if I do Preloader first, so let's open up Preloader. So we're opening up the archive file here, and you'll see that there is an apps folder sitting in there. So all we need to do is on our SD card is copy that folder into the root of our SD card, and that will then integrate the apps for our preloader application into the main apps already on our SD card. So if I drop that in there, if we then go inside our apps folder, you'll see that we have our preloader app folder in there, and then inside that, these are the actual files then for that particular app. So all we need to do now is to go through and do the same for each of our apps. So I'm going to go back across here and just copy each of these. They will have their own apps folders and copy them across into our main apps folder. So we've got all those apps copied across now. If we look inside the apps folder, we should now have our 3 apps all ready to go. So let's pop this into our Wii and let's actually install the software on there. So on our Wii, we need to get the Homebrew channel up and running. So select that from your menu. And what we should find now is that once Homebrew boots up, we should have a number of those apps now ready for us to run. So here are our installer apps ready to run. So let's install Preloader first and just load that. And once that's set itself up, we get a menu. And again, you can see here, we need to press plus on our Wii remote, or if you have a GameCube controller plugged in, you would press the A button. So let's press plus to install this. And that should be everything all loaded in. So let's press A to go back to our loader. And we now have our load preloader app here. So this should let us test to see if preloader is actually installed. So if we start up this one and then load that. And we are now in our preloader menu. So we know that preloader is now working and that we can use our load preloader to get into it. So preloader not only provides us with our brick protection, but it also lets us make a few changes to the way the system works. So if we come down to our system menu hacks and press A for that, you can see there's a whole range of things that we can do here. So what I would advise you to do is to block your disk updates and also block your online updates. So I'm just selecting them with the D-pad and then A to change the value. And then I'm going to region free everything. So once we've done that, again, you can have a play with the other ones as you want, but I really want to come down here and go to our save settings. Okay, then press the B to get back out of that, and then go back to our Homebrew channel. So once back in here, we can now continue with our installation. Coming up to our cIOS installer, and let's load that in. And in this one, we do have to make a number of separate installations here. So it is slightly more complicated, but just press any button to get through the warning screens. And here we're using our D-pad to change the 4 selections at the top. So the top selection here, we want to go across to this D2X V11 Beta 1. We're then going to come down and change the base number to 38, the slot to 248, and then the cIOS revision wants to go all the way up to 65535. So once we've got those 4 settings in, we press A to continue, and then A to continue again. And that will install that cIOS. Okay, so we continue for that with the A button. We now need to change the cIOS base and cIOS slot for another 3 versions. So here we want to get to the base of 56, and the slot number wants to be 249, and then A to continue for that, and A again, and that will install the second one. And then our third one is a base number of 57 and a slot number of 250. And then our final one is a base number of 58 and a slot number of 251, and install that. And again, all of these numbers I will put in the description or actually on the main website page that goes with this project. So please do check in the description for a link to that. Once those are all installed, we can just exit out of this installer with the B key, and we should drop back into our Homebrew homepage. So that's our Wii fully modded and protected. So it's time now to get playing some games. Now obviously if you have some Wii discs, they will just simply plug in and play as normal. But what we want to do is to be able to play some backup files. So we'll be able to back up our discs, put them onto a USB drive, and then plug them in and play them from there. Now obviously you would be able to go online, and it's not so hard to find other people's backup files. So if you do look at that, you will need to try and find some WBFS backup files, and they will work best with what we're going to be doing here. But obviously do bear in mind that everything you find online is subject to copyright, so just be aware of that as you start to download games. But the application we're going to use to be able to play our games from USB is this USB Loader GX. So again, I'm on the Wii guide. In site navigation, there's a link off to this page. And all we need to do, as usual, is just simply download the actual application files and put them onto our SD card. So I'm going to download the loader file from here. Let me just clean up that. If we scroll down here, we should find that we have a download link. So here's the download link to our application, and let's just download that. So same as before, we're just simply going to open up that downloaded zip file. Inside there, we should find an apps folder. And we're simply going to drag that onto the root of our Wii SD card, and that then should merge itself in with our apps folder that's on there. And there we have our USB Loader GX. So let's just pop that into our Wii. So back in our Homebrew channel, you should now find you have a USB Loader GX application. Now if we click that at the moment, obviously we haven't got any games set up yet. So if we click on that and load that in, we'll actually find that it tries to look for, it talks about a hard disk drive, or you can have a USB drive, and you can of course get it to use your SD card. But at the moment, obviously we haven't got those set up, so we're going to need to go and do that. But I just want to show you this just so that you know that if you do get these screens coming up and nothing loads, and when it comes out into the actual application, it just simply lists your normal Wii channels, that is because it hasn't found any setup games directory yet. So let's go and come out of here, and let's go and set up our hard drive. So you can really use any USB drive you want as your Wii hard drive. So it could either be an actual hard drive, so here I have an SSD drive connected to a USB port, or it could just be a normal sort of thumb drive. But either way, it must be formatted again as an FAT32 drive, otherwise the Wii isn't really going to work with it. And plugging it in at the back of the Wii, you'll find two USB ports. So you can use either in reality, but the preferred one is port 0. So with the Wii standing vertically, that will be the right-hand USB port. So once you've got your USB drive prepared, we need to get some games on there. Now, the Wii needs these games to be stored on that hard drive in a particular way, and that will make sure that they work easily with our USB loader in terms of sort of getting the games identified correctly so that we can download media and images and so on. The best way to do that is to use a backup manager. So again, I'm back on the Wii guide, and if you're in the site navigator, if you go to the Wii backup manager, you'll come to this page. Now this is an application that actually works only in Windows. So if you are using a Mac or Linux computer, there is a little note here which will point you off to other applications that you can use to do the same job on those computers. But I'm going to take you through then on the Windows Wii Backup Manager. And really all we need to do is to click the download link here and simply download that zip file onto our computer. Once that's downloaded, we simply need to extract those files. So I'm going to extract them into a folder on my hard drive. And there we can see I now have my Wii Backup Manager extracted files. And inside there, we'll actually find the program executable files themselves. So all we need to do is to fire up one of these. Again, I'm on a Windows 64 computer, so I'll use the 64-bit version. Just fire that up. And there we have our Wii Backup Manager. So Wii Backup Manager is an application that takes our Wii game backup files and is really going to make sure that they have the correct naming format and are in the correct file format for use in our USB loader. And that will allow the USB loader to identify the games and then download various media such as game discs, images, and so on. So the way this works then is that we need to tell it where we're going to store our game files. So if we click on the Drive 1 tab here, and then select from the drop-down list, so this is going to be the hard drive or USB drive that we're going to be using in the Wii. So if I select my drive K here, because we've got a newly formatted drive, it's going to say that it is valid, but it doesn't yet have our WBFS folder. So that's the folder where it's going to store all of our game files. And we just say, yes, let's create that. So we now have a blank disk which is ready to receive some games. So if we go across to our Files menu and then add some files, we simply need to go and find the game files that we want to use. So I have a number of game files sitting here. So I have some of them already in this WBFS format and one of them then in this ISO format. And the good thing about the Wii Backup Manager is that it's able to take a range of different file types and convert them all then into the correct WBFS format, naming them correctly and putting them then in the correct place on our USB hard drive. Now, it doesn't cope with every file type that you will find if you have a look around on the internet. I will cover converting those in another video. But for the moment, if you find WBFS files and ISO files, then those will work absolutely fine. And we can simply select all of those if we want to, and say we want to open those. So we now have a list of files that we are able to transfer across. So if I just select all of those, and then say transfer, that will then transfer them onto my Drive 1. Remember, Drive 1 we set up as our USB drive for the Wii. In there, and we can see they're now going to transfer across. And again, depending on the speed of your USB drive, that will take a certain amount of time. So let me let it run, and then we'll come back. So that's all transferred across. So if we now have a look at our Drive 1, you'll see that we have the game sitting in there. The important thing is that each game has been correctly identified. So every game for the Wii has an ID number, and that's how the various USB loaders identify which particular game this is, and then what media files it needs to download. And you can then see some information about that, and so on. So this is now ready to plug back into our Wii and get some games up and running. So back in Homebrew, if we now restart our USB Loader GX, one of a number of things is going to happen now. So mine has picked up my USB drive and is now initializing that. But you might find that it doesn't actually recognize it yet. Now, either way, what I would suggest you do first of all, because we are now, I've been playing about with it and we're in this different mode at the moment, so it's not in game mode at the moment. If I go to my settings screen and then go across to page number 3, and go to default settings and say yes for that, that will now bring my USB Loader GX back to its default settings. Now for me, that has now picked up on my hard drive, and you can see it's now gone into game display mode. Now if yours doesn't pick up on your hard drive, go to your settings menu and go to hard drive settings. And in this bit up here where it says game install partition, if you select that, it should then find your hard drive. So if we go back then until we get back to our home screen, you should at that point then find that it has picked up and it now displays your game files. Again, if you find you're still in that channel mode, just simply go back to the settings and go back to default settings, and it should now be aware of your hard drive and come back here into game mode. Now, one of the really nice things about the USB loader is that it does create a nice interface for your games with lots of images and so on. Now obviously at the moment we haven't got any images and we'll need to download those, so you do need to have an internet connection for this process. But obviously that's something that we set up at the very beginning of our video. So all you do here is you simply have a game highlighted, you simply click on the no image bit. We then select which particular images we want to download, so just leave them all selected and then click on OK. And what that will do, it'll say it's found some files and we just simply then want to download them. We say OK for that. And we should now find that if we select one of our games here, we now have some images. Now obviously this is in list mode here. There are a number of different modes that we can use at the top. So if we go to the carousel mode, you can see there that we have a really nice set of images and a nice interface for our games. And that really is now everything set up. So if we click into one of these games, we should find that that actually runs. And there we are, Mario Kart booting up. Let's start that. And we should be into our game. And there we have our Mario Kart now running from our backup file on our USB drive. And again, we can go through and set ourselves up and start playing the actual game. That's pretty much our Wii gaming system all up and ready to go. You just simply need to add a few more games. Now obviously we've just done the basic setup here, and there are a number of things that you will find a little bit annoying with our setup. So one of the main things there will be the getting into a game. So you will always have to come through Homebrew into USB Loader and then find your game. And if you come out of a game, it will actually drop you back into the Wii menu, so you'll have to go through that whole process again. So there are a number of tweaks that we need to make to get this system just nice to use. And again, we still haven't looked at GameCube gaming and all of those other real emulations and so on that you can do with your Wii. But I'll be doing all of that then in a series of new videos. So do please make sure that you subscribe to the channel so that you can get access to those as soon as they're released. And make sure you have a look around the other videos in my channel to see all my making and gaming and electronics videos. So I hope to see you again very soon, and bye for now. For more games programming, electronics projects and retro gaming, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel and visit my website.